Hi there, I'm Kevin Gentry, and welcome to the Going Big podcast, where we explore the strategies and stories behind transforming your effectiveness by 10xing your fundraising and marketing. Each week, I'll be sitting down with some of the most influential business leaders, CEOs, and nonprofit visionaries to talk about leadership, the power of giving, and how to make a real impact. If you're ready to go big and to elevate your organization to new heights, you're in the right place. You can find the Going Big podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and YouTube. And don't forget to follow us on social media and visit our website, 10x Strategies, TENX Strategies.com, for some great free resources. Let's dive in. Well, what a great pleasure it is to be with my old friend Tim Kachuriak from NextAfter. Tim, you and I have done a number of these discussions over the years. I always learn a lot each time. So I'm ready, and I hope our audience is ready right now to learn a lot more about all that you do at NextAfter to test why people give, how they give, and then how nonprofits can apply that. And it's all part of our Going Big approach, because you are constantly urging your clients to go big, which I love. All right, Tim, out of the box, Why do people give?
Well, giving to a charitable organization, as you know, Kevin, is a very personal decision. And what we've concluded after 7,000 plus fundraising experiments is that there's no one definitive answer. Some people give because they're angry. There's a problem, a social ill in the world that they see, and they believe that this organization, this mission, this cause, this charity can actually solve that problem. And so when presented with this problem, they give out of this triggered response of anger. Some people give out of a sense of belonging, like they want to be part of something bigger. They want to have their life be connected to something that's more than just themselves. And some people give out of an extension of their identity. It's a very personal reason. They're saying to the world, this is who I am by the causes and organizations that they support. So unfortunately, I don't have a definitive answer for you as to why people give. And that's why it's such a challenging business to be in. We have to be a really good listener and be able to understand who we're talking to so that we can actually represent a value proposition that's going to make sense to them.
Well, I know in this discussion today, you're going to unlock a whole lot more in terms of the answers to questions people have. But related to that, how do people give today? Online giving is steadily increasing. We certainly see in political campaigns, certainly the news from the recent presidential campaigns, you have this immediate, massive surge of giving that can happen after big events. That's got to be happening online. We know that the majority of charitable giving in the United States is done by individuals, not by foundations and corporations. Individuals, 2/3 of it is by individual people. And increasingly, people are doing that through social media, through online giving in different vehicles. Comment on that, because that's at the core of what you're testing, right?
Well, absolutely. So when I first kind of got into the nonprofit space, I was actually on the client side. So I went and I worked for a nonprofit organization. And this is back in 2007. I had a background in digital marketing. They hired me to do digital communications. And unfortunately, the day I showed up for the job, the founder of the organization, who had been at the helm for 35 years, had a sudden heart attack. He was hospitalized for a little bit, and then he passed away. And we went from being about a $36 million a year operating budget organization to 18 in less than 12 months. So I found myself in this kind of weird, interesting death spiral where I was given a violent shove into fundraising. And Kevin, I mean, most people that don't understand like the beauty of this craft that we get to do of actually inspiring people to give, they don't have a very high view of fundraising. I believed it at the time as a necessary evil, kind of like a means to an end. But I was introduced to a gentleman who ran a direct response agency, and he kind of introduced me to like the philosophy or even the theology of giving, where you get to inspire people to give some of their treasure to people that or organizations or causes or whatever that actually really represent something that they're very passionate about. And that's a beautiful thing, right? Because we're constantly surrounded by this hyper consumerism where everybody is every consumer brand organization is constantly competing for our attention so that we can go spend everything we have on our own wants, needs, interests, desires, pleasures, what have you. And what the fundraiser does is it gives person an alternative, a moment of pause that takes them out of themselves, where they can actually give to meet the wants, needs, interests, and desires of someone else or something else. And that is, in fact, a very beautiful thing. So when I started in this space in 2007, digital giving or online giving represented a very small sliver of the pie. This is still very nascent at the time. And it probably was certainly less than 10%. It was probably closer to about 5% of overall fundraising revenue for most organizations in the space. That started to continue to climb as, obviously more and more commerce moved online. We became more familiar with actually making transactions. So we do have the big consumer brand companies to thank because they trained our marketplace. Our donors are also consumers, trained them to become more comfortable conducting business online, buying products online, paying bills online. And so this certainly opened up the opportunity for people to give online. And so online giving continued to climb, and it kind of like reached this plateau at around 10%. It represented about 10% of total giving. And then something happened, actually something fairly recently in 2020 during the COVID pandemic. People obviously were not going to fundraising events anymore. There was some trouble with like even mail getting delivered for a little period of time. And so a lot of donors were actually moving more into online giving. And that's when, we saw like the rise of Zoom and teleconferencing and all this stuff because people couldn't get on airplanes and fly anywhere. We're all kind of stuck in our, sheltered in place locations. And so people just became a lot more, familiar and comfortable with this stuff. And I think that's really accelerated this digital transformation. So today, digital giving represents probably about 15, 16% on average, depending on which study you look at. For many of our clients, it's now over 50% of the revenue. And I'll tell you that once it moves to 50%, that's the business, right? Like that is actually like now the business that you're in, as you are a digital shop. So it's been kind of interesting to see. There's been a lot of things that we've experimented with to try to accelerate that even further. But I think that we'll still see a continued growth of that. Not that the other channels will go away. We're still going to have the need to sit down and have face-to-face conversations. It's definitely the most effective form of fundraising. Direct mail is always going to be a very powerful medium to be able to cut through the clutter and reach people and inspire them to give. But digital is going to continue to be a growing piece of that pie.
Awesome. Thanks. Well, you and I know that the great beauty of direct response, direct mail, online, anything like that, is that we can test it. We can understand what drives giving, what drives response, what drives average contribution, all that kind of stuff. Otherwise, you're just speculating.
That's right.
You started NextAfter many years ago as a product of your work. You've now got a gazillion clients that you're helping. Many of them you're really helping to go big. Your number 2 principle is always be testing.
That's right. That's right.
Tell us what you mean by that.
Well, I went to a conference in 2009, and I had been really becoming obsessed with this idea. How do we optimize fundraising, right? I had read all the best practices and I've been to all the other kind of conferences, but I went to this for-profit digital marketing conference. And in the first 15 minutes, I was completely enraptured with this whole idea that the web is perhaps the greatest behavioral laboratory that's ever existed. We can go ask people their opinion. We can even, sit down and interview them. We can do focus groups and you'll get their opinion. But what we find is that what people say and what they do are often two very, very different things. And so when I was seeing like these A/B tests, these experiments where they're testing one donation or one, it wasn't even a nonprofit, one e-commerce landing page versus another e-commerce landing page. And what they're doing is they're serving every other visitor, either this page or this page, and then they're measuring the results. I was like, holy cow, why don't we do this on the nonprofit side? Why don't we start to begin to experiment and test and change different variables to figure out what actually moves people to say yes to giving? So after that first 15 minutes of the conference, I called my team. I said, we're going to change the way we do everything when I get back on Monday. And I was thinking like, wait, why wait till Monday? That very day, we were working with the George W. Bush Presidential Center. We were doing all the digital fundraising for the $300 million capital campaign to build the new Presidential Library and Center at SMU. And we're doing anything that anyone would do if you're trying to acquire donors online. We're doing social media, we're doing online ads, we're doing email list rental. And we happened to have an email that was going out that same day to 200,000 people. And we had an email that was working very, very well. We were actually netting money and acquisition, which, as you know, Kevin, is a very, very rare thing. And sometimes when you have something that's working, you're afraid of actually making changes to it because you don't want to break it. But what I was learning at this conference is that adequacy is the enemy of excellence, and the only way we can continue to get better is by willing to putting our best ideas to the test. And so I called my team. I said, give me an hour. I'm going to go and just try to apply some of the things I'm learning here. I'm going to come up with a new recipe for this email. And we're going to run an A/B split test. We'll split the file in half, and 100,000 people will get version A, 100,000 people get version B, and we'll see if this stuff works. And I'm staring at my email, and I started to panic because I'm like, I don't know what to change. So I focus on something that I thought would be probably the best variable, which is the call to action. And it was only the very last sentence of the email. And I knew that only 14% of the people read to the end of the email. So how could making one tiny change make that big of a difference? So we changed the call to action. We ran the test. And that one change produced a 139% increase in click-through, which produced a 42% increase in revenue. Now, people ask me, say, well, what would happen if that first test didn't work? Well, I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't be here. But it did. And it changed everything for me. Everything. And I ran back, we started testing thing after thing after thing after thing. And I was realizing that I don't have to pretend to be the expert anymore. I mean, as consultants, as agency providers, even as people that are working in positions of leadership inside of our organizations, people look to us and they think that we have all the answers. And I think deep down we know we don't know all the time exactly what's going to work and what's not. And so this takes a lot of the pressure off because everything can be framed as an experiment. We can test. And we can use data to help inform our decisions about what works and what doesn't.
Oh, this is terrific. Yeah, let the numbers speak for themselves, right?
That's right.
You hit on some extremely important things. And as you know, they're still vastly misunderstood in the nonprofit fundraising space. The old expression that it's part art, part science. So many people rely on the art side thinking, oh, our donors are bored, or I don't think they're going to like this, or I don't think they want to go to this kind of thing, but they don't know. And the thing is, as we find so often, it's very counterintuitive. What we think would work often doesn't, and what we think would never work does. And you and I have got tons and tons of examples about how we just get flipped upside down, realizing, wow, that longer communication is better than the shorter communication. That subject line, Drew, that kind of response compared to that one, tell a little bit more about that.
Well, I've got a few examples, and these would be very practical for the listeners today. So these are some things that are rather unintuitive, but we've tested them over and over and over again with different organizations, sometimes in different countries and different languages, and we find similar results. So let me give you one. If you go to your organization's main donation page, go and analyze and read what's on that page. And what many people may find is that there's not a whole lot actually of copy on that page. It's simply a command. Donate now. Here's the form. Fill it out, and hit the submit button and fall down before the lords of fundraising. And so the problem is with that approach, once somebody gets to the donation page, we know based on industry benchmark data that less than 20% of the people that click on the donate button actually complete the transaction. That's a data point. And you have to ask the question, well, why? Well, it's because when you get to that page has all cost and no value. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, it's not just the material cost of how much you're going to give to support the charitable organization, but it's also the mental cost of actually having to go through and fill out your pesky donation form. And then, maybe get to the end and you hit the button to submit it and something doesn't work. And it's friction, it's anxiety. It just causes a lot of consternation. And so that's the cost side of the equation. But what about the value side? How do we actually put value on that same page? Well, you do that by doing what our mothers taught us from a very young age. Use your words, son. Use your words. And so what we found is actually using some of that page space to lay out a lucid, compelling value proposition is one of the best ways to add value to the page. And what is a value proposition? Well, it's an answer to a simple question. If I'm your ideal donor, why should I give to you rather than some other organization or not at all, right? And so all you have to do is actually really try to do as best job you can of answering that question. Here's the problem you're going to run into. You're going to have a tendency to answer that question from an organizational centric point of view, right? Because you are inside the organization, most likely, or you are the agency working on behalf of the organization. And so what you need to do is you need to, start by really just talking to as many donors as you possibly can and get their answers. Take all of the answers that they provide, all the reasons, all the claims of value, and compile that into, an argument, basically. If I'm asking you that question, why should I give to you? Then it should begin with the word because we are the only organization that we've been doing it for this many years. And like, here's our statements of impact and, data point, and maybe a story, because people don't just make decisions based on rationality. They make it based on their emotions, right? But what we found is actually when we add words to the page and we do an A/B split test, in some cases, 200, 300, 400, 500% increase and donation response simply by adding copy to the page. Now, Kevin, I know that you have like a deep background in direct mail, and you know that actually words matter. And sometimes we make the mistake of thinking that the people that are getting to that page don't want to read it anymore. They just want to get through the process as quickly as possible, but that couldn't be further from the truth. So that's a simple thing you can do, is look at your donation page and say, what can I add to this page that's going to communicate more value to my end user?
All right. If people want to learn more about your experimentation, how can they learn more? Do they just go to the NextAfter website? I know you've got your big NIO summit coming up
That's right.
very soon. Maybe there's still time for people to come to Indianapolis. I've been to that conference. It's amazing. It's electric. You learn so much, but the atmosphere is extremely inspiring. Tell folks how they can get more engaged in this stuff and learn from it and benefit from it.
Well, absolutely. So, I mean, the simplest thing is we publish all the experiments that we have permission to from our clients on our website at nextafter.com. Out of our 7,000 experiments that we've run, there's probably at least half of them that are publicly available. You can go and look at the control. You can look at the treatment, or version A or version B. You'll get a write-up of like what we learned. Here's the data set of like actually, how much this made a difference. So you can go check out all that stuff. We also have 11 different certification courses. So if you really want to go deep into the wormhole, you can go take one of our certification courses and A/B testing for nonprofits, or email fundraising optimization, landing page optimization, value proposition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's all available at nextafter.com. If you are able to get to Indianapolis, we do host the annual NIO Summit every single year. That's at neosummit.com. You can go check it out. And there's also virtual passes for free if you just want to go attend that. But what's unique about this conference is that we bring in marketing, psychology, data, analytics, kind of thought leaders from all over the world. And we try to source the absolute best talent as we can possibly afford. And we bring them together for 2 days to pour into our nonprofit community of about 1,000 in-person attendees and usually about 5,000 or 6,000 virtual attendees. And it's really quite an experience as well. So this year's theme is Indiana Jones. So it's Generosity Jones and the quest for the Holy Grail fundraising, which is pretty fun. And so we have all kinds of antics and fun and games that kind of are highly themed around that concept.
Well, if you can't go this year, go next year, or perhaps go online to watch it virtually. I remember one of your presentations on the psychology of giving. You had the importance of storytelling and how that just releases all these different chemicals in the brain, which aids retention and understanding. Many people don't understand that, when we remember that vivid moment where we were on September 11th, or where we were and something happened, or that first day of school, it's a lot of chemical stuff affecting the brain. And when you have a compelling storytelling in your emails, in your direct mail, in your presentations, it can have an enormous effect on how people react to it all.
That's absolutely right. There's some fascinating research on just like the impact of oxytocin release in the brain and how that actually impacts generosity. One interesting data point, Paul Zak, I believe he wrote the book, The Moral Molecule. I can never say that. Moral Molecule. That's hard to say. Anyway, and in this book, he has a number of different social experiments he performed. In one experiment, he had 2 different groups of people. And to one group, he dosed them with oxytocin. The other one got a placebo. I have no idea how he dosed them. I kind of like to think that he's like, oh, you got mustard on your neck, and sticks them with a needle, but I don't know. But then he gave each of them a sum of money. And the participants in the study had the opportunity to make the decision. They could keep all the money for themselves, or they could give a portion or all of the money away to a charity that they choose. And what was interesting is the people that were dosed with oxytocin were 80% more generous, and it was predictable 80% of the time. And so as a fundraiser, we need to be saying like, man, how do we start dosing our donors with oxytocin? And you're absolutely right, Kevin. The number one way that you can do that is through effective storytelling. There's research that suggests that storytelling actually like activates the vagus nerve that's connected to like your brainstem and all these different organs and stuff. And it's also involved in the release of oxytocin. And so if we can tell compelling stories that puts the donor in the middle of this hero's journey where they get to be the hero, to be able to go and help and solve this problem through partnership with your organization and their financial gift, man, you're just giving people an incredible gift that will probably not just make an impact for the charitable organization, but it'll make an impact on the donor, because every time a donor gives, they change a little bit. They rediscover something they lost, and they get more connected to their true identity because it's the things they care about.
Love that. Love that. Love the hero's journey metaphor, because the donor is the hero in helping address a big problem in society, getting to the root cause of it. And that's at the core of what we really believe with respect to transformation. We can help donors through partnership achieve their objectives, and it becomes a very important defining part of their life as to how they made a true and consequential impact. That's really, really cool. All right, so we know the future is unknowable, but what do you think the future holds in terms of online giving, charitable giving, just what you're kind of seeing, anything that you might peer into your crystal ball and tell us about?
Well, there's some really interesting developments that are making nonprofits have more opportunities to participate in traditional forms of advertising, marketing, and outreach. One of which is the advent of connected TV or connected television. What's really interesting about this, if you go back to like the old days of like how you would buy TV advertising, you're buying day parts, you're buying ins and outs of shows, and like you're getting these reports back of saying, we think your audience, probably likes these kind of shows at these kind of times, and you buy there. And you have to make big ad commitments because you're buying the entire, if it's a very large, audience of people, you're having to pay for all the audience, even though there's probably only maybe 20 or 30% of the people that are the ideal customer profile or donor profile for your organization. And so what connected TV does, and actually there's more homes on connected television sets now than there are on actually traditional linear television sets. So like that is now, again, the business. What connected TV does is it connects the screen to an individual human being, right? So I can actually send an ad to Kevin Gentry, which is pretty cool. I can go buy people that look like Kevin Gentry. You couldn't do that necessarily before. And so it's much more efficient, much more targeted, and it opens the door for organizations, nonprofits included, that have personal identifiable information that they can use to be able to say, here's who I want to target. I went to this consumer brand conference put on by this group called LiveRamp, and there's all these consumer brand companies that are totally freaking out because the key to participating in marketing in the future is actually owning your own data. And from the very beginning, because we've been so direct response driven, nonprofits own all their own data. And that is going to become really, really exciting in the future, being able to see how that plays out. Well,
Tim Kachuriak, we got so much more to talk about into the future. I'm going to have you back when you've got more test results to talk about. But last question for you. For those listening today, why should they care about all this testing and experimentation work that you're doing? What relevance does it have for their cause, their nonprofit organization, whatever it is they're trying to address in society? Why does this stuff matter to them?
Well, it comes down to really, I guess, the charter of what you're trying to accomplish and what we're all trying to accomplish, which is trying to figure out how to go big. What we're trying to do is give you a cheat code, right? If you don't have the resources or if you don't have the volume to be able to go run, 7,000 experiments, then go draft off of the things that we've learned. Take the insights that we've been able to extract from 12 years and over, $18 million of research and use it to help your organization get to this place where you can start to go big. So that would be the reason.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Tim Kachuriak, if you're interested in this stuff, intrigued by this stuff, check out NextAfter.com, their website. You can learn a lot just by going there. And if you're really intrigued, it's coming up very soon, September 17th in Indianapolis. Check out the NIO Summit, perhaps either attending it virtually, but certainly attending it in person. I can't recommend it enough. It's an amazing experience in and of itself, not to mention how much you learn. Tim Kachuriak, thank you for all that you're doing, your team is doing. We're going to bring you back again soon. Thank you, and as always, good to be with you. Thanks for listening to the Going Big podcast. I hope today's conversation inspired you to take your fundraising and marketing strategies to a whole new level. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Pandora, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also watch all of our episodes on YouTube. And don't forget to follow us on social media and visit our website, 10xstrategies.com. That's TENXstrategies.com for more great content and for free resources to help you go big with your leadership and with your giving. I'll see you on the next episode of the Going Big podcast.